In this video, we're going to go into our user service interface and implementation, and we're going to create an update user details method that will take in the user details that we need to update, and actually it needs to also take user ID. So we'll need to include one more method parameter here that's going to be an ID. We're going to update a user with this ID, and we're going to use this user details in the update query. Okay, so now let's go into user service and go into my interface, and I will need to add one more method which returns user DTO, and it's going to be called update user, and it takes in two parameters. One is string ID, let's do it user ID, and another is user DTO user, like this. And now I will go into user service implementation. That's inside of our source main Java implementation of our user service interface, and I will click to add unimplemented methods. Okay, let's scroll down to find it. Here we go. This is our update user method that we will need to implement now. And before we can update user details in our database, we will first need to make sure that user with provided user ID does exist in our database. So I will make use of our code that we have prepared earlier here, get user by ID, and I will copy this, the return value, and the first line of code that uses user repository to find user by ID. Okay, and now I will check if user entity is not null, and if it is null, then we will throw that user not found exception. So I will paste this line of code as well to check if record is not found in our database. We will throw user not found, and we will provide user ID. Or because we have created an error messages enum, we can use that in enum as well. So that is inside of response package, and it's called error messages, and we can look for no record found, and then get error message to return the message that we want. And we can throw not user not found exception, but we can throw user service exception, which we have created. Let's just import it. Okay, but again, it's up to you. You can throw your own exception, or you can use the user not found exception, which comes from Spring. Okay, so we have our user. Now we will need to use this user object to update the details that were sent with the user data transfer object. So I will take the user entity. These are details of my user that are recorded in the database, and I will update it with only those fields that I want to update. For example, I do not want to update email address, and I do not want to update the password. So I'll skip those fields, but I will update first name, for example. And the value of first name I will take from user data transfer object here. So I'll get first name from it. And I will update last name. Last name, and I will also take it from the user object. Get last name. And again, the business logic here is entirely up to the needs of your application. Before setting this value, you might want to check if last name is not null, and if it's empty, then you might not want to set it if it was not provided, but maybe because if it was not provided, then user wants to clear it. Again, it's up to your needs. The business logic here, it's entirely up to you. But let's assume that the user wanted to update their first name and last name. So this is how we do it. We first read the record from the database, and then we update those fields that we wanted to update. And once we have user entity object ready, we can use this entity together with the user repository to save this information in the database. And to save information in the database, we can use a ready-to-use method that comes from Spring Data GPA, and it's called save. So all we need to do is to use that method, and we need to give it user entity. We don't have to write any SQL queries, just call save and give it an entity that you want to save. And that will return user entity. So I can, for example, declare a new object, user entity, and call it updated user details equals, and now I will use binutils to copy values from updated entities into the return value that I want to return. And our return value is user data transfer object. And now we will return the return value like this. Okay, and this is it. I hope we did not make any mistakes here. Let's just continue, and when we run our application and send update user details request, we will see if there's any issues that we have introduced, and if there are, we will fix them right away.